Welcome to SCM Live. I'm Keith Martin, publisher of Sports Car Market Magazine, and I'll be your host today. This is a spotlight edition where we focus on a member of the sports car market community. Today's guest is Tom Papadopoulos from Autosport Designs in Long Island, New York. Tom, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Fine. You ready to tell us your story?
It'll be my pleasure.
31 years ago, you sold your first Porsche. Tell us about it.
31 years ago, I borrowed 14 grand from my grandmother and started a service facility for Porsches. The sales came much, much later. I was just a wrench. So
what made you to make the decision to go from wrench to sales?
So it really wasn't my decision. It was probably the right era to be in. And I had a lot of clients who would have me doing pre-PPIs, inspections all over the world. And finally, a lot of them said, if I'm going to trust you to write the 4-page, 5-page list, why don't you just go find it, tack on a couple bucks for your trouble, and that'll be your savings account. So it's actually the clients who got me into it. Before that, I thought, oh my God, car salesman, that's sort of like, next to reptilian, being a reptile. So, it came at a time where it was based on trust, and you were making sure that the person who was buying the car was really getting what they wanted.
When did you have that moment of realization where you thought, oh my God, I'm a classic car sports car dealer?
Probably about 20 years ago. I mean, it just, it's fun because I call myself an orphanage. And what I tend to do is I believe you educate the client as to what they think they want. On occasion, they really don't want it or could ruin their dream by getting behind the wheel and realizing that it's nothing of what they originally meant it or thought it would be. And in many cases, they should probably get a nice model for their desk or a poster for their wall, but the car that was their dream wasn't. So I actually like when people ask for the education and sell it to themselves if they're going to be a true car enthusiast like we are. We adapt to the car. The car doesn't care who we are.
So Tom, you started with Porsches. Today we're going to look at 3 Porsches, 2 356s and a 911 that you have in inventory. Tell us about the first one.
The first one is a 64 356 SC with an electric sunroof from the factory, which I've known for several years and chased for a while until the owner was ready to sell. And, it's hard to come by a proper car that's got original longitudinals, floors, battery box, numbers matching, original colors, and a factory electric sunroof. So I think it's, of the 356s, it's the big daddy of the production cars, unless, of course, you had a Carrera 2 with a 4-cam engine.
What makes the 356s so hard to restore properly?
I think they didn't cost much over the years, and, people did do mediocre restorations, and I do think a lot of people learn how to weld on them doing their restorations, and we've seen cars that have been clipped and have front end from one car and a rear end from another, and I just think that people don't realize it is cost effective to get in them, but you really should have a specialist look at them carefully because a lot of them haven't been restored well. I mean, even if you have the quote unquote driver, if you have it inspected and you find a good driver for $70,000, $60,000 for B, maybe 70, maybe a little more for a C, a little more if it has a sunroof, how much does it take to go from the mediocre driver that is solid, you're going to have a good time, and if you put $50,000 in, you get someone else's love affair and monetary mistake on what is a $200,000 to $300,000 restoration. So you're actually saving a lot of money if you can inspect the car and find out that it is superior to the driver. I just like there's bang for the buck, and it's just fun every time you get in it.
Tom, what's the magic of the SC?
The SC was the highest horsepower, if you could say that about a 4-cylinder 1600 Porsche. I think it's more so as the last of the model range before the 911. It had disc brakes rather than B's and A's that had drums. It's the least hot rodded of them. I mean, a lot of people take the A's and earlier B's and make them outlaws, make them rally cars. I just think it was the ultimate 356 at the time.
Where do you peg the value on this car?
So to be quite honest with you, we're asking $159,000, where a year and a half ago, before the bubble burst a bit, I sold one at the Gooding auction in Monterey, in Pebble Beach, for $190,000, and it didn't have a sunroof. I don't think, I paid $134,000 for the car. Uh-huh. So there's the spread, right? And I would pay up as a restorer, basically because I think even if I make $10,000, $12,000 on the car, I've done the next person a great favor for buying the better car.
What's happened in the market for these cars since you sold the one at Gooding?
Well, I think because I don't think the 356s have moved quite as much as a lot of the other air-cooled Porsches, the 6-cylinders, 911s, and they were truly in a bigger bubble, if you will. I think that everyone was trying, the auctions were great. You were flipping cars like it was a stock. Their brokers were advising people to invest in automotive assets, but they're not automotive assets if you buy them at the height of the market. And a lot of the mediocre cars were hanging on the coattails of the good cars. So I believe the market had to level, and it has. And you have a $50,000, $60,000 spread based on the same model in many 911s or 356s. I think I answered your question.
You did. If this were an average car without a sunroof, where would you peg the market value?
Probably 90,000 if it's a driver average, or it could be closer to 100. It depends whether it's numbers matching, whether it is. I don't care if they are numbers matching, because in the day many of them were warranted, and they just replace the engines. I'm not a fan of whether they have. I'm a fan if they have non-matching engines, but the correct type. So there are a lot of variables, and it depends what someone wants out of it.
So what you're saying right now, this is a special car, good options. It's a good solid car, and the market's gotten a little softer. So is this a buying opportunity for someone?
I think it is, but you really have to be seasoned Porsche guy to understand the difference, because there are way too many cars that are a lot less, and you've got to figure out why you're justifying another $60,000. But that also comes with the best of the model range as well, that will hold its value the best.
What do you say to someone who says, I found this average driver and it's $60,000 or $70,000, and I think I'll just buy that and then have it restored?
Well, I think, as we all well know, being in the business, if it is something that you want to restore, a lot of the people like to go through the process as well. And it doesn't mean you're going to get the money back, but you're going to enjoy yourself, hopefully. And if it's a solid car to begin with, you'll have a very nice car when it's finished. But what would I say? It really depends on the person. I mean, I very much prefer when someone else has done a great restoration, and I can act like a customer for myself in my own garage. And regardless of whether I could do it, I'd prefer a car that someone did extremely well. It was a rotisserie restoration by those who are noted and honorable in the business, and you saved a lot of money.
So tell us about the other 356 you have.
The other 356 is a twin grill roadster. It's a B twin grill roadster, which is rare basically because of the twin grill amongst the Porsche clients and aficionados. There are 125 of them. Now, it's exactly the same as a single grill roadster, 356B roadster, but has always been coveted and holds a much better value. I mean, a numbers matching show car has been sold upwards of $300,000 to $400,000. I think that's now off about $80,000 or maybe even a little bit more, because it should be, because the auctions have touted them and the bubbles burst. We have a nice leveling, if you will, or restructuring, so that, again, we can have two of the same cars and a spread based on condition. And there was one on Bring a Trailer that recently didn't sell. I think it went to $240,000, and I think the gentleman must have thought that it was worth more. I agree. I'm asking $295,000 for the one we have. I think that's pretty much to scare everyone away. We own the car for $230,000, and these days, if someone picks up the phone like the old days and calls, and we have a discussion, you'd be amazed that, we're just looking for a fair deal for all. But
what would you have listed this car for at the peak?
I've sold them for $400,000, because it's sort of a newer generation speedster in my mind, but with roll-up windows, and it's rare.
I had a chance to ride with Bobby Rahal at Hilton Head in his 356 twin grill roadster, and he was so happy to have a twin grill. What do you think it is about having two grills that bring such a big smile to Porsche owners' faces?
I think it's not the twin grills. I think it's the fact that it's limited production like anything else.
Uh-huh.
It's a special car amongst the Porsche aficionados. I understand that. My own personal preference would be the same car for $150,000 less.
So tell us, now let's move on to a 911. Tell us about the 911 you have.
So I have a 73 911T, which is a 2.4 liter with a CIS injection. And in this case, it's a car we're asking $139,500 for. It is a car that you couldn't possibly. I've sold 2 or 3 times in the past. It's always been well cared for. It was a full restoration. It's always been maintained. Its services are up to date. And I look at it as it's an early 911. There's no way you could buy one and restore it and get this car, even for my asking price. There's just no way. And have all the photos and the documentation to go along with it.
How close is this car to an RS?
People say it all the time. It's not. They're great. They're cruising cars. They're sporty, but they're not RSs. RS is a 2.7 mechanical injection, and when you get on cam, that car it feels lighter. It feels like it's a car that you can take on a tour, or you can go for coffee, but it would prefer to be on winding roads or a track. The 911T or its variant of this E variant or S variant, they're really nice cruising 911s that are sporty, but they're not RSs.
Tell me, what's the difference between a 356 buyer and a 911 buyer?
I guess one being more of a cruiser. Although it's they can be similar, because you will have a lot of 356 buyers who build their cars to outlaw spec, and want a quick 356 that's eligible for a lot of the tours, which we will eventually have come back in the rallies, but they need a little more power out of it. I think the early 911 guys appreciate the cars and really have to look on the early long hood cars to find one that is also, these cars weren't galvanized. There was also not a rusty car before the restoration. Or if it's quote unquote a driver, again, is it really a driver? Or once you unearth the first little piece of rust, does it turn into a full restoration, whether you like it or not? So, I mean, they're similar. They're just Porsche guys. And the best part about all of them is they go and go and go. I was just telling a client of mine who was in road testing several Porsches. When we started out, I thought it was amazing. I mean, you have guys in a 3.2 Carrera, and they do 8-track events a year, 3 days of 8-track, so 24 days, and they do 3 years of them with normal maintenance, and then maybe it would need refreshing. But that's a lot of time on a car that's going to the track and will just come back for more. I thought, what a great business to, people use 911s. They even drive them in the rain. So
let's move to something completely different. In addition to these 4 and 6 cylinder small displacement cars, you've got a car there that's got a big V8. Tell us about the ESO.
I think the ESO is a special car because it is just an Italian coach-built car. It has American muscle. It goes like hell. It has every creature comfort and convenience of the day. And it also is built in limited numbers.
You have from what I saw the hood, you've got one of the 7-liter cars?
Well, the Series 2 car, the one we're looking at the moment, is a Ford engine car. We do have one with a 7-liter as well, but the Ford engine could have the pancake hood.
And what attracts you to this car?
Its condition. I bought it years ago at auction for a client, and we knew it had all the bones and good provenance, and it was a Turin show car, and numbers matching, and it was originally white. But something that, as you well know, with some of the Italian cars, they have a ton of passion, but a lot of them were quite hasty in their build. So restorations can be tough on occasion and time consuming and cost a hell of a lot of money to make it right. This was just a good car from the get-go. It has never had a bad life. So it was worth making that much better.
Is that car for sale now?
It is for sale.
And how much?
The car is for sale for $375,000 asking.
Now these cars were unknown and unloved for many, many, many years. What caused them to start to suddenly perk up in value?
I think if you look at a lot of these Italian cars, they obviously picked up in value based on the Ferrari market going up and up and up and up and up, and really pricing a lot of people out of the car of their dreams. So the Lambos came up a bit, the Maseratis came up a bit, ESOs came up, but you also are looking at the last up market was in 1991. So it took quite some time to get to the next up market. And again, the cost of restoration certainly is a big deal. Right? In 1991, you could take a Ferrari Daytona, bring it to Italy in the outskirts of Maranello, have any restoration company do it, give them $100,000, and they'd give you eight boxes of lira back as change. That doesn't happen anymore, right? The cost of restoration is huge. Whether it's a $200,000 car, $500,000 car, $4 million car, it's probably close to proper restoration, $400,000 to $500,000 today.
Yeah, and how much time?
3 years of your life.
Where's the market on these cars now? Has it come back down a little bit? Are we still in a bubble?
It has a bit. I think the 7 liters, the Can-Am cars, if you find a really, really good one, are still in the 6s.
Uh-huh.
And but there are plenty of them there's a driver that you can buy tomorrow for $250,000, but it's an automatic. And how much will it take to buy that car and make it the one I have, if you can prove the provenance of my car as well as the condition and the photographic documentation for the restoration, and just any specialist coming to inspect it on behalf of someone.
Tom, you don't get much of a 12-cylinder Ferrari for $2.5 anymore, do you?
You don't.
So
it's kind of crazy. I mean, and you know what? To be honest with you, the only one you do is it can be loved. It sometimes is or isn't, because you have to like the 70s. But I think a 365 GTC4 is a civilized brother to the Daytona, and an awful lot of car for the money.
Who's the buyer for the ESO?
Italian car collector who I think is the same kind of individual who might like a Di Tommaso Mangusta or a Pantera. Enjoys the fact that it was a certain era in the 60s. It could be an Italian car aficionado, lover, collector that You know, you have your Ferraris, you have your Maseratis, you have a few Lambos, or whatever the case, and ESO has to be added to the list.
And
but I like the fact that people use them once they own them.
now I'd like you to tell me, let's switch over to Aston Martins. We had a brief chat, and you explained to me that the Aston Martin V8s, they really came in two flavors, the cars that came to the colonies and the cars that stayed in England. Can you explain that a little bit more to me?
Well, the European spec cars, which we've, first of all, up to 1980, there were very few coupes, and the Volante came out in 1977. And in the United States, almost every dealer ordered Volantes, and coupes were special order. So I think from 1980 to 89, I think there aren't no more than 40 of the V8 coupes in whatever variation. The Volantes also standard engine. The American car had exhaust manifolds that were incorporated with 4 catalysts and then 5 mufflers behind it. So if you read a magazine of an Aston Martin V8 and it said, an English magazine said, this is great, lots of horsepower, lots of torque, comfort, goes like hell, and then you drove an American car that felt like a sporty alternative to a Rolls Corniche to go to the golf club, you wondered, oh my God, who paid these guys to write that? And unless you're really into it, I think Astons are a great bang for your buck. I have several V8s, but I like them very much, and I'm prejudiced because they've never let me down. And I think they are an English muscle car.
Can you desmog, Europeanize these cars? Do people do that to give them the European performance and still meet DEQ regulations and things like that in this country?
You can, especially since a lot of them are 25 years older. Or now, especially, you can import cars from Europe that we were never allowed to have. And it's more than just the federalization. The American cars had 5 mile per hour bumpers. So to make it a world car, you have to do some modifying. And for us in the colonies, if you will, the problem is that 2/3 of the Astons ever made were right-hand drive. So we've seen a lot of people convert from right to left-hand drive because the cars coming down the assembly line never knew what they were going to be, whether right, all the holes are there. They could have been either or. I've been, the first time I was at the factory was 1977, and I'm fairly sure you could hear someone saying, hey, that was supposed to be right-hand drive, but we've sold one to the colonies, make it left drive, and they'd get their typewriter out and rewrite a build sheet. So it's the product industry with the best of them.
Before I ask my next question, I'm going to take a second to do a shameless plug for Sports Car Market Magazine, if you'll give me 30 seconds. Can I have that?
As you should.
Sports Car Market Magazine here with Tom Papadopoulos at Autosport Designs, and we have got the deal of life for you. Go to sportscarmarket.com/Zoom, 25% discount. You'll get the magazine and the digital edition every month. That's less than a cup of coffee. And in fact, if you buy one of these cars on the show today, I will throw in a 10-year subscription just because I'm a good guy and I like Tom.
That's a pretty good plug, don't you think?
I'd like to go back to Aston. So if I were looking for a V8 now, would you recommend that you find me a good Euro car and bring it in as opposed to try to convert a US car to Euro spec?
Depending upon where in the world it is in the condition, it could be one or the other. And you can actually build it to the specification you'd like at this point. And I just think it's a lot of bang for the buck. I like it because it's a 4-seater. But no, I think you have to know what's out there. And, you know, Aston Martin only produced 14,000 cars from 1914 to 2003. So, or 1995, sorry. So, yes, you look the world over because you can bring one from Europe or you can bring one from California. It's the same amount of mileage.
Walk us through the V8 model line. What is your favorite? If you were to tell somebody this is the one to have, what would it be?
Probably the rarest of the bunch is the V8 Vantage. As far as I'm concerned, it was England's, Britain's first supercar. Paul Frere, a well-known French racing driver, labeled it a civilized Ferrari Daytona. It is enough horsepower and torque to pull a house off of its foundation. It is comfort, it is speed. I've driven them across the United States, across Europe, and they've been bulletproof if they're maintained. But it's a lot of car for the money. And if you want that same feeling with the top down, it's a Vantage Volante.
And so tell us the price range on both of those models.
Well, if it's Vantage is the designation for higher horsepower. So they're rarer, and a Vantage Volante or a Vantage Coupe will be anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000. And a standard Volante, which is no slouch, has 340 horsepower, plenty of torque, will be anywhere for a good car from, in European spec, from 180 to 300, dependent upon the specification.
And how do you see those prices holding up over the next few years?
I think they've got to, because you've got a lot of American cars. First of all, they didn't go up exponentially in the recent upmarket, which was great because we could still enjoy them. And if you find a car, you could buy a Volante for $100,000, but that's going to cost you quite a bit to get to the proper car that's been restored, serviced, rebuilt. And I think at that point, the depreciation you took for the restoration, if you enjoyed it, is okay, because you can now save the mediocre car. It's not an investment, but you're not going to lose your shirt if you decide to restore one.
So, Tommy, you've taken us on quite a car show cruise today with the 3 Porsches, the ESO, a tutorial on Astons. To our viewers, if they were thinking of getting their very first classic car, what words of advice would you give to them?
Just to follow their passion, do their due diligence, make sure they've road tested it, to make sure that they enjoy it for their own lifestyle, and then make sure you have it inspected, no matter who has it. You know, the car will always tell the truth.
Tommy, thank you very much here at Autosport Designs. I'm Keith Martin, wrapping up this edition of SCM Live. This has been a spotlight on Tommy Papadopoulos from Autosport Design. Thank you for joining us, Tommy.
Thanks so much, Keith.